Are we on? Are we on? Looks like it. How's it going, guys? Today we're going to finish up degree 14. We might move on to 15, the Rosy Cross, the Rosy Cross, Knight of the Rosy Cross. But first, I wanted to put something out there for us to consider. Some of you guys might have seen my contact videos that I've put out over the years. I use the word contact kind of loosely because I have never really decided exactly what happened, what the nature of these experiences really was. You know, are they aliens? Are they interdimensionals? Are they holographic projections from our future selves? But I am confident that it wasn't imagination, at least, largely because one of the incidents involved like 5 or 6 people. I was the only person that was a common denominator, so they didn't know each other. Nobody was talking. I wasn't talking to these people, maybe one of them, but the rest of them not, about this type of stuff at the time, so it's not like it was in the air. So something objectively happened. And basically, actually, I had a similar experience, but it involved mushrooms. Years earlier, like a decade before this other experience. And in both cases, I kind of got the same message, which was that at the very last moment, before we're about to destroy ourselves in World War III, there would be an intervention from aliens. And I just got word that Trump is allegedly getting ready to send troops into Canada. There have been Russian nuclear subs off the coast of Alaska for some time. And now Trump is putting nuclear subs in position around Russia, off the coast of Russia. So a Harvard astrophysicist or something, I don't know his exact title, but Harvard scientist, space guy, you know, has said that there is a mothership or a large, it's a engineered object. It's not natural because it is not conforming to the influence of gravity, and it's like near certainty that it couldn't possibly be just a giant meteorite. It's about the size of the island of Manhattan, and it's supposed to arrive late September, early November. It strikes me as interesting, at least, that I received this message, and so did some of the other people that had these contact experiences. And here we are on the edge of World War III, and there's apparently a large alien craft that will arrive ostensibly like right in the nick of time. So let's all keep our fingers crossed, because honestly, it's kind of like when an addict hits rock bottom. Humanity had to, I think, get to the point where denial is no longer possible. Where the situation is absolutely dire. And that really wasn't enough, But what happens is when you hit rock bottom and there's some kind of revelation or there's a massive jolt that kind of snaps you out of your fog. I think something of the magnitude of an alien invasion, maybe. I mean, I hope not. But the problem with expecting something peaceful here is that the ship is so large, it implies that it must be carrying an army and machinery. Otherwise, if they just wanted to like teleport a representative over here, that would be what they would do, you would think. So that's a little bit disconcerting. There is also the possibility that they're coming to pick up a lot of people. You can fit an awful lot of people in a spaceship the size of Manhattan. at any rate, definitely something to keep your eyes on, something to think about. We're going to be in the jungle right about the time that thing arrives, and I can't say that I'm not happy about that fact. You know, it seems awfully serendipitous that we're going to be in a nice, warm, relatively safe place with a lot of fruit and medicine when these folks arrive. So cross your fingers, prepare for rain, you know. What a world, right? So I think we left off kind of talking about the will, the purpose of the magician or the Mason, and his expectations in regards to his commensuration for his work and dedication. That basically there is none. You know, there's this thing with karma. A lot of people will do a good deed and they'll say, oh, good karma. But that's not the thing to do. You don't do good works expecting to reap rewards. That's not even what karma is. Karma is more like cause and effect, you know. But you, pure will, unassuaged of lust of result, is in every way perfect, right? And it's not that you shouldn't care about, you know, material success at all. And it's not an admonition against that. It's just saying that your chances of achieving success on a level that would result in compensation of that kind is much higher if you're motivated by a sense of purpose, that it is your duty to do the thing with all of your power and focus and concentration, unwaveringly. You know, it's something that, well, let's put it this way. Flow state for musicians, for example. This is when the real magic happens, right? This is why the Grateful Dead and Fish and jam bands like that will improvise for 20 minutes. Because they have to get into a altered state or a transcendental state of mind in order for this higher power to express itself through them, which is pretty much what's happening, I think. Aleister Crowley wrote in the Book of Lies, practice 100 times and it is difficult. Practice 1,000 and it becomes easy. Practice 1,000 times 1,000 and it is no longer thee that doeth it, but it that doeth it through thee. And not until then is the thing that is done well. Thus spake Frater Perturabo as he leapt from rock to rock without ever casting his eyes upon the ground. Right? And so if you actually get to the point where it is doing it through thee, and it is no longer thou that doeth it, you will be amazing at that thing because it's not you that's doing it. And that's not to put you down, but you know what I mean. It's this greater mind. And it is a cooperative effort, you know, so you still are involved. You still have your personal signature on it. In fact, interestingly, the people that manage to access that thing the most deeply have the most unique signatures, even though it's not really them doing it, in a way. A great example of that is Jerry Garcia. If he played any acoustic guitar, you could tell by the first note, even if you don't, you know, you could probably just listen to him a little bit even, and it's so distinctive from the first note, even like a barely familiar listener would recognize, oh yeah, that's Jerry Garcia. On an acoustic guitar. It really doesn't make any sense, you know. So this loss of self, or this yielding of self, actually results in a clarification and a sort of concentration of self. Everything contains its contradiction. To the magician, the contemplation of the future lets in light upon the present and develops the higher portions of his nature. He endeavors rightly to adjust the respective claims of heaven and earth upon his time and thought, so as to give the proper proportions thereof to performing the duties and entering into the interests of this world, and to preparation for a better, to the cultivation and purification of his own character. I swear I didn't read this before I came on. And to the public service of his fellow men. The Mason does not dogmatize, but entertaining and uttering his own convictions, he leaves everyone else free to do the same. He only hopes that time will come, even if after the lapse of ages, when all men shall form one great family of brethren, and one law alone, the law of love, shall govern God's whole universe. Believe as you may, my brother, if the universe is not to you without a God, and if man is not like the beast that perishes, but hath an immortal soul, we welcome you among us, to wear, as we wear, with humility, the conscious of your demerits and shortcomings, the title of Grand Elect Perfect and Sublime Mason. It is not without a secret meaning that 12 was the number of the apostles of Christ, and 72 that of his disciples. That John addressed his rebukes and menaces to the 7 churches, the number of the archangels and the planets. At Babylon were the 7 stages of Bersippa, a pyramid of 7 stories, and at Ecbatana, 7 concentric enclosures, each of a different color. Thebes also had 7 gates, and the same number is repeated again and again in the account of the flood. The Sephirot, or emanations, 10 in number, 3 in one class and 7 in the other, repeat the mystic numbers of Pythagoras. 7 Amshashpans, or planetary spirits, were invoked with Ormuzd. 7 inferior rishis, or Hindustan, were saved with the head of the family in an ark, and 7 ancient personages alone returned with the British just man, who, from the dale of the grievous waters. There were 7 Heliadae, whose father Helios, or the sun, once crossed the sea in a golden cup. 7 Titans, children of the older Titan, Kronos or Saturn. 7 Corybantes, and 7 Kabiri, sons of Siddiq. 7 primeval celestial spirits of the Japanese, and 7 Carfesters who escaped from the deluge and began to be the parents of a new race on the summit of Mount Albordi. 7 Cyclops also built the walls of Tyrrhus. Celsus, as quoted by Origen, tells us that the Persians represented by symbols the twofold motion of the stars, fixed and planetary, and the passage of the soul through their successive spheres. They erected in their holy caves, in which the mystic rites of the Mithraic initiations were practiced, what he denominates a high ladder, on the 7 steps of which were 7 gates or portals, according to the number of the 7 principal heavenly bodies. Through these the aspirants passed until they reached the summit of the whole, and this passage was styled a transmigration through the spheres. Jacob saw in his dream a ladder planted or set on the earth, and its top reaching to heaven, and the Malachi Elohim ascending and descending on it, and above it stood Ihu, declaring himself to be the Ihu Alhi Abraham. The word translated ladder is salam, from salal, raised, elevated, reared up, exalted, piled up into a heap. Agravit, salala, means a heap, rampart, or other accumulation of earth or stone, artificially made, and salah is a rock or cliff or boulder, in the name of the city of Petra. There is no ancient Hebrew word to designate a pyramid. The symbolic mountain Meru was ascended by 7 steps or stages, and all the pyramids and artificial tumuli and hillocks thrown up in flat countries were imitations of this fabulous and mystic mountain for purposes of worship. These were the high places, so often mentioned in the Hebrew books, on which the idolaters sacrificed to foreign gods. The pyramids were sometimes square and sometimes round. The sacred Babylonian tower, Magdal, dedicated to the great father Baal, was an artificial hill or pyramidal shape, and 7 stages, built of brick, and each stage of a different color, representing the 7 planetary spheres by the appropriate color of each planet. Meru itself was said to be a single mountain, terminating in 3 peaks, and thus a symbol of the Trimurti. The Great Pagoda, or Tanjore, was of 6 stories, surmounted by a temple at the 7th, and on this 3 spires or towers. An ancient pagoda at Giogor was surmounted by a tower, sustaining the mystic egg and a trident. Herodotus tells us that the temple of Baal at Babylon was a tower composed of 7 towers, resting on an 8th that served as basis and successively diminishing in size from the bottom to the top. The Strabo tells us it was a pyramid. Faber thinks that the Mithraic ladder was really a pyramid with 7 stages, each provided with a narrow door or aperture. through each of which doors the aspirant passed to reach the summit, and then descended through similar doors on the opposite side of the pyramid, the ascent and descent of the soul being thus represented. Each Mithraic cave and all the most ancient temples were intended to symbolize the universe, which itself was habitually called the temple and habitation of deity. Every temple was the world in miniature, and so the whole world was one grand temple. The most ancient temples were roofless, and therefore the Persians, Celts, and Scythians strongly disliked artificially covered edifices. Cicero says that Xerxes burned the Grecian temples on the express ground that the whole world was the magnificent temple and habitation of the supreme deity. Macrobius says that the entire universe was judiciously deemed by many the temple of God. Plato pronounced the real temple of the deity to be the world, and Heraclitus declared that the universe, variegated with animals and plants and stars, was the only genuine temple of the divinity. Jesus also borrowed that. How completely the Temple of Solomon was symbolic is manifest not only from the continual reproduction in it of the sacred numbers and of astrological symbols of the historical descriptions of it, but also, and yet more, from the details of the imaginary reconstructed edifice seen by Ezekiel in his vision. The Apocalypse completes the demonstration and shows the Kabbalistic meanings of the whole. The Symbola Architectonica are found in the most ancient edifices, and these mathematical figures and instruments adopted by the Templars and identical with those on the Gnostic seals and abraxae connect their dogma with the Chaldaic, Syriac, and Egyptian Oriental philosophy. The secret Pythagorean doctrines of numbers were preserved by the monks of Tibet, by the Hierophants of Egypt and Eleusis, at Jerusalem, and in the circular chapters of the Druids, and they are especially concentrated in that mysterious book, the Apocalypse of St. John. All temples were surrounded by pillars, recording the number of the constellations, the signs of the zodiac, or the cycles of the planets. And each one was a microcosm or symbol of the universe, having for roof or ceiling the starred vault of heaven. All temples were originally open at the top, having for roof the sky. 12 pillars describe the belt of the zodiac. Whatever the number of the pillars, they were mystical everywhere. At Abari, the Druidic temple reproduced all the cycles by its columns. Around the temples of Chilmanar in Persia, of Baalbek, and of Tukti Shlamach in Tartary, on the frontier of China, stood 40 pillars. On each side of the temple at Pastum were 14, recording the Egyptian cycle of the dark and light sides of the moon as described by Plutarch. The whole 38 that surrounded them, recording the two meteoric cycles so often found in Druidic temples. The theater built by Scaurus in Greece was surrounded by 360 columns, the temple at Mecca, and at Iona in Scotland. In a stream soon come, we will talk about some of the things that were mentioned here that are kind of obscure, like the Architectonica and the Abraxae. Make a note. Chapter of the Rosy Cross. Let's just do a little bit of this one. See what it's all about. Knight of the East, of the Sword, or of the Eagle. Perfect. All others in Masonry is symbolical. Based upon historical truth and authentic tradition, it is still an allegory. The leading lesson of this degree is fidelity and obligation, and constancy and perseverance under difficulties and discouragement. So actually, we're going to wait because we want to start each of these at the beginning of a segment. But that's what it's going to be about. So this last degree, really, the Royal Ark of Solomon is 13. We should probably have done that before. Anyways, we'll do a Rosy Cross, and then we'll go back and do the Royal Arch of Solomon. But this last degree, the Grand Elect Perfect and Sublime Mason, really is one of the most important messages in this book. And it has to do with purifying your motivations, with bringing yourself into alignment with what is believed to be the moral code that is like an emergent property of the natural laws of the universe. It is not true that morality and ethics and even economic systems and political systems, that the best is a matter of opinion, or what is right and wrong is a matter of opinion. There is objective truth, and that truth may conform a bit to circumstance, right? So in one situation, it may vary from, another. And the fact that morality can be something like a vector on a plane of derivatives or something, like, doesn't change the fact that it's still basically algorithmic, that there always is like an absolute right. And the reality is, without the dissonance that has been deliberately inculcated into people through engineering, people instinctively know. You don't have to pull out a calculator and work it out, algorithmically. You can just, you'll know. And one might argue, well, does that mean that in the ancients of days, when there was no real societal engineering, that everyone was just perfect and there was no violence and blah, blah, blah? And the answer to that, of course, is that evolution is a real thing. It's also probably true that there has been some degree of social engineering present ever since there was any kind of culture at all. The Greeks, I think, for a while, really tried to engineer their society around the knowledge that was taught in the mysteries. And I don't think that lasted very long before somebody decided that they wanted to take advantage of everyone. And it's very easy for a narcissist or a psychopath to get the upper hand with a group of honest people. It's more difficult if they're illuminated. They're going to know what you're up to, but I don't think that that's ever been the standard for the common man necessarily. And the reality is that at this point in human history, if we wanted to sufficiently educate people and illuminate people, we have the resources and the information access and the experience to do that. So whether it was true at any other time in history is not really relevant. The facts are that we can accomplish this now, and we know that we can, beyond just education and toolkit. We have knowledge of entrainment, and we know that everything is entangled, and we know that if we elevate ourselves, we elevate everything else. With the right leader, we definitely can compel the human race and its consciousness onwards and upwards. And due to the law of entrainment, it is not possible for it to regress, or what is the word they use in addiction when you relapse and whatever, you know what I mean? It's not possible. I think regress was a fine word. So with all that in mind, thank you guys so much for your patronage, and we will start doing our voice chats again maybe tomorrow. It depends on how things go. We're still doing the retreat until the 11th, possibly longer if anyone signs up for the duration through September. And then we're going to be in the jungle in November. Really looking forward to that. There's still some slots open, so if you guys want to join us, shoot me an email, and I will see you